Ever imagine your business could be smaller than you think, even if it's making millions in revenue?
Oh, yeah?
It's crazy, right? That's what happened to one agency owner
Wow.
who described their finances as a total clusterfuck.
Oh, no.
So we're diving into agency profitability today,
Okay.
using some insights from a marketing school YouTube video
Yeah.
featuring agency expert Marcel Peda.
hmm
It's basically a sneak peek into one of his coaching calls.
Okay.
And it's packed with useful info, whether you're an agency veteran or just starting out.
It's amazing how many businesses operate under a financial illusion,
Right.
even those bringing in big bucks.
It really highlights that saying, revenue is vanity, profit is sanity, doesn't it?
Yeah, for sure.
So let's unpack what Petit calls the cycle of insolvency that
Yeah.
traps so many agencies.
Think about those times you felt buried in client work
Oh,
and
yeah.
how you reacted.
I mean, just take more work, right?
Most agencies hire more people,
Yeah.
then scramble for even more work to keep them busy,
Yeah.
which just perpetuates the cycle.
It's a hamster wheel.
What's alarming is that this pattern
Mm-hmm.
can persist even when you're hitting those coveted multi-million-dollar revenue milestones.
So you're like killing it, but you're not really killing it.
Right.
It's a reactive approach that doesn't actually address the underlying issue.
Exactly.
Right.
And this is where traditional profit and loss statements, or P&Ls, can be misleading.
Okay.
Accountants love them for tax purposes, but they don't always give agency owners the insights they need for sound decision-making.
So what's the alternative?
Yeah.
How do we move beyond just looking at revenue
Well-
and start truly understanding profitability?
Petit introduces two key metrics
Okay.
that can paint a much clearer picture. The first is agency gross income, or AGI.
AGI.
Think of it as your true revenue, what's left after subtracting those pass-through expenses.
Through expenses. Can you give me an example?
Sure. Imagine you're running a Facebook ad campaign for a client.
Yeah.
They pay you $10,000,
Okay.
but you spend $8,000 of that on the actual ads.
So even though $10,000 came in, my actual revenue is only $2,000.
Precisely.
Mm-hmm.
Your AGI in this case would be $2,000, not the full $10,000. Understanding the distinction between revenue and AGI is crucial because making decisions based on inflated numbers
Yeah.
can have disastrous consequences.
You're making decisions on fake money.
Right.
And Petit actually shares a pretty shocking example of an agency
Yeah.
that learned this the hard way.
They thought they were a $6 million business based on their revenue,
Oh, wow.
but their AGI was a mere $900,000.
That's a big difference.
That's a huge discrepancy
Yeah,
that
yeah.
could lead to some seriously flawed business decisions.
Big yikes.
Yeah.
Talk about a wake-up call. So AGI helps us grasp our true revenue, but what about actually making sure that revenue translates into profit?
That's where the second key metric comes in, delivery margin. This measures how much of your AGI is left after paying for all the direct costs of delivering client work. Think salaries, software subscriptions, and all those essential tools. Petit emphasizes that delivery margin is the single most important metric
Okay.
for agency profitability.
Yeah.
Ideally, you want to aim for 50% or higher.
50% or higher. Why is that number so critical?
Think of a healthy delivery margin as the oxygen for your business.
Okay.
It gives you the breathing room you need to invest in growth, pay your team well,
Yeah.
and ultimately build a more resilient and profitable agency. But here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
Remember those agency audits Petit mentioned?
You mean the ones where he analyzed the financials of hundreds of agencies?
Yes. And over 90% of them were struggling with their delivery margin, not overhead,
Interesting.
as many would assume.
That's surprising. I always thought bloated overhead was the biggest profit killer.
It's a common misconception.
Yeah.
But the reality is that many agencies simply aren't managing their delivery costs effectively.
Okay.
And that directly impacts their delivery margin.
So how do we actually improve this all-important delivery margin?
Right.
What are the levers we can pull to boost that number?
Petit breaks it down into three key levers:
Okay.
average cost per hour, average billable rate,
Mhm.
and utilization.
Okay. Let's break down each of those. Let's
Yeah.
start with average cost per hour, or ACPH.
Okay.
What exactly is that?
ACPH helps you figure out the average cost
Yeah.
of an hour of labor at your agency.
Uh-huh.
It's about understanding your true labor costs.
Yeah.
Are you overpaying for tasks that could be delegated? Are you using freelancers strategically to bring down your average?
So ACPH helps answer those tough questions and highlights areas where we might be able to be more cost effective.
Exactly.
Right.
Even small tweaks
Yeah.
can have a ripple effect on your overall profitability.
Now, what about average billable rate, or ABR? I thought that only applied to agencies that bill by the hour.
That's the common misunderstanding.
Okay.
ABR is a powerful metric for any agency,
Okay.
regardless of your pricing model.
I'm intrigued. How so?
Because ABR goes beyond hourly billing.
Okay.
It reveals how much revenue you generate for every hour dedicated to client work, period.
So we're talking about the bigger picture.
Yes.
Total revenue divided by total hours worked, no matter how you're actually billing the client.
Precisely. And what's fascinating is that improving your efficiency can be just as impactful as raising your prices.
Oh, wow.
Especially in a tough market where clients might be hesitant to pay more.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
So you're saying if I can figure out how to get more done in less time,
Right.
it's essentially the same as increasing my earning potential for every hour worked.
Exactly. ABR is like a secret weapon
Yeah.
for boosting profitability without necessarily changing your rates.
Okay, we've covered ACPH and ABR. Now let's tackle utilization, which I have a feeling is a bit more complex.
It can be.
Yeah.
And it's often misunderstood.
Okay.
At its core, utilization measures the percentage of your team's capacity that's actually being used to generate revenue.
So it's all about how much time your team is actually spending on billable work.
Yes.
Okay.
But there's a nuance here that's often overlooked. It's essential to differentiate between delivery hours and billable hours.
I have a feeling this is where the confusion comes in.
You're right. Delivery hours reflect the actual time spent delivering on a project, even if it goes beyond the initially scoped hours. Let's face it, scope creep is a reality for most agencies.
Scope creep is an industry standard. I think it's built into every project plan.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But billable hours are what you actually charge the client for.
Right.
Which might not accurately reflect the time invested.
Ah, I see. So if we're calculating utilization based solely on billable hours, we might be getting a distorted view of our team's actual workload.
Precisely.
Okay.
We might think our team isn't that busy and projects are running smoothly, when in reality they're working overtime and projects are going over budget.
Yeah, that's not good.
Right.
So the key takeaway here is to calculate utilization based on delivery hours.
Yes.
To get an accurate picture of your team's capacity and efficiency.
You got it.
Got it.
And remember, this is primarily a management metric, a tool to help you, the agency owner, make better decisions about resource allocation, not a way to micromanage your team.
Definitely. No one likes to be micromanaged.
Right.
So are there any good benchmarks when it comes to utilization?
Yeah.
Petit did mention some specific numbers in the video.
He did. For your peer producers, like your designers, copywriters, and developers, you generally want to aim for a weekly utilization rate of 75% or higher.
Okay.
That's roughly 30 to 32 billable hours per week.
Makes sense. Now, what about roles like delivery managers or project managers? Their work isn't always as easily quantifiable in terms of billable hours.
Exactly. For those roles, utilization tends to be lower, maybe around 50% or so, because a lot of their time is dedicated to managing the delivery team, keeping projects on track, which might not always be directly billable.
But their role is absolutely essential to a smoothly running agency.
Absolutely.
Even if it's not always reflected in billable hours.
When looking at your entire agency, including team members who don't do any direct client work, Petit suggests aiming for at least 65% of your team's time being available for client work on a weekly basis. Annually, after factoring in time off and holidays, a healthy utilization benchmark is around 50% or higher.
Okay, so we've now covered all three levers.
Right.
For improving delivery margin: ACTH, ABR, and utilization. But I have a feeling this is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to agency profitability.
There's a lot more to it.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll get more into that in the next part.
All right, so stay tuned, folks. We'll be right back after a short break.
Sounds good.
Okay, so we've laid the groundwork with those key metrics. Now, let's get into the nitty-gritty of how this all plays out in a real agency setting. I'm ready for that example you promised.
All right. Picture this: an agency with a team of 50 people.
Okay.
Which translates to roughly 100,000 hours of total capacity.
Wow.
Their annual delivery costs are $3 million, and their overhead sits around $1.5 million.
Got it. So how does this agency stack up in terms of profitability? What do their numbers look like?
Initially, they were operating with a 50% utilization rate and an average billable rate of $100 per hour.
Okay.
This means they were only using 50,000 of their available hours to actually generate revenue.
Let me do the math here. That's $5 million in revenue, right?
Yeah.
But with a 40% delivery margin and a measly 10% profit margin, that's not exactly a recipe for success.
You nailed it.
Yeah.
They were leaving a lot of money on the table. So what did they do? They started by focusing on that first lever we discussed.
Yeah.
Utilization.
Right.
They took a hard look at their project management processes, sales forecasting, resource planning.
Yeah.
By tightening things up, they managed to bump their utilization rate up to 60%.
Okay, so now they're utilizing 60,000 hours for billable work without even touching their average billable rate.
Right.
What kind of impact did that have on their revenue?
Their revenue jumped to $6 million simply by selling more of those available hours at the same $100 rate.
Okay.
This single improvement boosted their delivery margin to a much healthier 50%.
Yeah.
And more than doubled their profit margin to 25%.
That's pretty incredible just from optimizing utilization. But it sounds like they didn't stop there, did they?
Nope, they were on a roll.
Okay.
Next, they tackled their average billable rate.
Right.
Well, they may have implemented some pricing adjustments. The real game changer was their focus on efficiency. They streamlined processes, developed templates and systems.
Right.
And essentially, they found ways to deliver the same value in less time.
It's all about working smarter, not harder.
Yeah.
So how much did they manage to increase their average billable rate by?
They got it up to $125 per hour.
Okay.
Combine that with their utilization rate holding strong at 60%, and they were now generating a very impressive $7.5 million in revenue.
Wow, what a difference efficiency makes. But what I really want to know is, how did this all impact their bottom line? What happened to their delivery margin and profit margin?
Their delivery margin shot up to 60%.
Wow.
And their profit margin hit a remarkable 40%.
So they basically quadrupled their profit margin.
They did. And all of this without drastically raising prices or resorting to cutting overhead.
What strikes me is that they achieved this incredible transformation primarily through internal improvements.
Right.
It really highlights that you don't always need to find higher-paying clients or compromise on quality to boost profitability.
Absolutely. It's about optimizing what's already there.
Yeah.
Unlocking that hidden potential within your existing business model.
Okay, so we've seen how powerful those 3 levers of delivery margin can be. But let's shift gears a bit and talk about another crucial aspect of agency profitability: pricing.
Okay.
Petit is a big advocate for aiming for a 70% direct delivery margin on every project.
Right.
Can you explain what he means by that?
He's talking about those costs directly associated with delivering a specific project.
Okay.
This includes your team's time, any project-specific software or tools, and any other expenses directly tied to that project.
Okay.
The 70% target accounts for all the hidden costs that often get overlooked when pricing projects.
Hidden costs. You mean like those administrative tasks or internal meetings that aren't directly billable?
Exactly.
Okay.
Things like team downtime between projects and all the behind-the-scenes work that goes into running an agency.
Yeah.
By aiming for a 70% direct delivery margin, you're building in a buffer to absorb those indirect costs,
Right.
which ultimately helps you maintain a healthier overall delivery margin.
That makes a lot of sense. But what about those projects where predicting costs is tricky? You know those situations where scope creep seems inevitable?
That's where Petit's Agency Pricing Quadrant comes in. It's a brilliant framework for choosing the right pricing model based on 2 key factors: value and risk.
Okay.
On one axis, you have value. How valuable is this project in the client's eyes? And on the other axis, you have risk. How confident are you in predicting the scope and costs?
So it's all about evaluating each project in terms of value and risk to determine the best pricing approach.
Right.
Does that mean value-based pricing isn't always the best solution?
That's right.
Okay.
Sometimes a good old-fashioned time and materials approach might make more sense.
Right.
For example, if you have a low-value project with a high risk of scope creep, time and materials can be the most sensible option.
Okay.
Because you're mitigating your risk by getting paid for every hour you invest, regardless of how long the project actually takes.
Precisely. Now, on the other hand, if you have a high-value project that also carries a high risk, you might consider what Petit calls abstracted time and materials.
Right. You're catching on quickly.
Okay.
This approach involves selling broader time horizons, like days, weeks, or sprints,
Okay.
and using cross-functional rates for your team.
So instead of quoting a fixed price, you might say, this project will require 4 sprints at a rate of $10,000 per sprint.
Exactly.
Gives you more flexibility to adapt as the project evolves.
It allows you to accommodate those inevitable changes in scope and client demands,
Right.
without having to constantly renegotiate the contract.
Brilliant. Now, what about those low-risk projects? Where do they fit into this quadrant?
If you have a low-value project with low risk, flat fees can be a great option.
Okay.
You can create a perception of value by anchoring your price to a deliverable
Okay.
and taking on the risk of delivering within a specific time frame and budget.
And for those coveted, high-value, low-risk projects?
That's where value-based pricing really shines.
Okay.
You align your pricing with the outcome or value the client will receive,
Yeah.
rather than the time it takes to deliver it.
So instead of charging for a website redesign, you might charge for the increase in leads or sales that the redesign generates.
Exactly.
You're essentially tying your compensation directly to the value you're providing.
And that can often command a premium price.
Hmm.
I really appreciate how Petit's framework provides a clear roadmap
Yeah.
for choosing the best pricing model for each project.
It all comes down to understanding the dynamics of value and risk and aligning your pricing strategy accordingly.
Absolutely. And don't forget that golden rule.
Yeah.
Always aim for that 70% direct delivery margin.
Right.
To ensure healthy and sustainable profit margins. Pricing is a powerful tool for profitability.
Yeah.
But it's not just about charging more. It's about choosing the right pricing model.
Right.
And ensuring your margins are strong enough to support a thriving business.
This conversation has been a real eye-opener. It's like we've uncovered a